Mass Concerts presents
Rocket Shock.
October 14th through 16th at the DCU Center and Palladium in Worcester. Featuring Trivia, Mac and Igor Cavalera, The Rocking Dead, Twisted, and more live on stage. Meet Malcolm McDowell, Scream's Matthew Lillard, and Skeet Ulrich, Danielle Harris, and stars from American Horror Story, Rob Zombie's 31, Sleepy Hollow, and many more. Enjoy panels, movies, shopping, tattooing, creating, and much more.
Rocket Shock.
October 14th through 16th at the DCU Center and Palladium in Worcester. Tickets available at the Palladium and DCU Center box office, FYE stores, and ticketfly.com.
Info at rockandshock.com.
This is Mick Foley.
This is Harley Race.
This is Shelton Benjamin.
This is Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff.
This is the Monster Abyss.
And this is Daniel Bryan.
This is JBL, and you're watching the MWF.
Be there live.
I agree with you. I mean, it's there's good talent, there's good athletes. I go to these independent shows and these signings, and they have matches, and there's a lot of young, good wrestling talent out there that just needs to be tweaked with the psychology and get away from this shock wrestling.
Exactly.
You don't have to shock people by pulling somebody's clothes off or cursing or giving the finger or making foul gestures. You can't take your children to, and really, the children are the ones that, so if a child or two children want to come to the show, they bring mom and dad. You sold 4 tickets.
Right.
If you're selling to this Generation X, it's for college guys, they scrape up enough. I remember when I was in college, I didn't have any money, so they scrape up enough money, and then maybe one of the 4 guys goes, and so they've lost touch with their fan base.
For pointless reasons. I mean, it's just, if it was drawing, if it was, what they were losing was making up for it in the long run, I could see it, but it's really not, because the business isn't as hot as it was, at different points of time. But we don't want to degrade the poor WWE. They try the best they can. They just sometimes have ulterior motives and to worry about what the average wrestling fan wants to see, I guess. But that's money in their pocket, not ours anymore, right?
That's true.
Let's go back to a positive memory.
Years, but I just, it's not sour grapes. I just feel that I owe a little bit loyalty to the fans because they paid my bills, and I hear the feedback. And the fans are still out there. They just don't want to pay for what's offered them now.
There's millions of wrestling fans out there that enjoy pro wrestling. They just don't have anything they want to support right now.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. Sure. But let's talk about WrestleMania again. WrestleMania 6 now, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. 60-something thousand fans at the Toronto Sky Dome, the home of the Blue Jays. You team up again with Smash, this time to take on the now tag team champions, the Colossal Connection, Andre the Giant in Haku. Your thoughts on that feud leading up to WrestleMania 6 and the big WrestleMania event itself?
Well, we had had matches with them for some time. And, of course, he was, literally a giant. But at that particular time, Andre's health was, I think, bothering him a little bit. He wasn't the same guy I had met years before that. But then, on the other hand, he had Haku, and Haku was a monster. He was a machine, just going. And, it was a big event, very awe-inspiring event, because it was at the Dome, like you say. It was jam-packed. The atmosphere was electric, and we were actually looking forward to the match. I don't think we had anticipated the response when we won, because we actually, there again, were surprised about the big pop. But that was a big event. I mean, that was one of the ones that I can remember as being, wow, this is something to be in.
Sure, it was like a human sea, and just to be in the middle of it and getting that emotional response when you regain the titles for the 3rd time, that's something you probably still get goosebumps about it now when you think about it.
Well, you had all these celebrities backstage, and you're rubbing shoulders with them, and it was like a big production. It was like, although I had been in a lot of pay-per-views, and other matches. This one just seemed to be a little more electric. I don't know what it wasn't much different in my preparation. In our preparation, we still got dressed the same way. We put our face paint on the same way. We set up our time for stretching the same way, but there was just a lot more action happening. And then maybe the fact that it was out of the country, too,
Sure. And sadly, that'll go down as the last nationally televised match of Andre the Giant in WWF.
Yeah. It was, Andre was a good personal friend of mine, a good family friend of ours. And it's just bad, as we had mentioned earlier, too, related to the fact that a lot of my good friends are passing on. And it's
right. More and more. Just look at the past month. There's been 5.
Oh, my goodness, it's scary.
It sure is. It sure is.
Yeah.
But then 1990 rolled along, the summertime. Demolition adds Crush. And to the point where I was a fan as a kid, I didn't like that. Tell the fans why Crush was added into the mix with Demolition.
Well, some of the fans probably heard that, I got sick. Actually, what happened, we were getting ready for a big pay-per-view. And by that time, I had gone back and forth to Japan about 35 times, sometimes for a week, sometimes for 8 weeks. And I had built up a intolerance for shellfish, and I didn't know about it. So a couple days before the big pay-per-view, my wife and I was home, we went to go to a movie, and before the movie we went and had a dinner at one of our favorite restaurants, which was a Japanese restaurant. And I had a shrimp and lobster sauce dinner. Well, almost immediately, I got sick. Of course, I didn't know what was the cause, and went into anaphylactic shock and had to be rushed to the hospital. Well, stayed in the hospital for 2 or 3 days, and they ran a bunch of tests, but immediately the doctor that admitted me told me I had an allergic reaction, but they had to run all the battery of tests to see what it was allergic to, and it was the iodine in the shellfish. And I was fortunate because he said the first one usually isn't that bad. And subsequent to that now, I've developed an allergy to not only shellfish. I can eat regular fish, but not shellfish, lobsters and shrimp and so forth, clams. Also developed an allergy to bee stings. So over the last 3 or 4 years, I've had to carry an EpiPen with me. But going back to what happened, there was a period of about 4 weeks where I was going to go through the testing, and I wasn't going to jeopardize my life
right
for wrestling. So they brought in Crush, and in the meantime, I had gone through all the tests and got a full clearance, and came back, and then we were in a dilemma where we had one too many Demolition.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because Crush is a very nice guy, but he wasn't ready for that position.
No, not at all. And even as I was...
It was a top high-pressure position, and we had already established a fan base, and the thinking was that I was going to move into another position with the company.
Mm-hmm.
Well, after further research, I decided that wasn't going to be for me. So in the interim period, between then and the Survivor Series, I believe it was, I had made my decision to leave. But the fans never really accepted Crush.
No,
and
not
rightly
at all.
so. I mean, that wasn't the team that had won all the battles. That wasn't the team that they had cheered for. That wasn't the team that they had supported. It wasn't anything against him, but he just wasn't an accomplished enough performer at that time to do that job.
He wasn't X. I guess it's
Sorry?
best. He wasn't X. That was the
Right,
to sum it up
right.
in one sentence. Sure.
Right.
I remember the SummerSlam pay-per-view when you took on the Hart Foundation. I believe that was a 2 out of 3 falls match. They tried to push the idea, well, oh, Axe and Smash look so much alike, we don't know who is who. And I mean, if that wasn't an insult to the fans, at that point I was maybe 10 years old, and I'm like, they don't look anything like each other. Smash had longer hair and the face paint.
See how smart you are, and how let's say, arrogant the bookers are?
Sure. That was just, I couldn't believe it. And then I remember the next month, they did 6-man after SummerSlam. It was you, Crush and Smash against the Ultimate Warrior and the Legion of Doom at the Boston Garden. It wasn't the same from that point. And then, like you said, that took us to
some of the worst matches we've ever had.
What was it like? Were you looking forward to having the Legion of Doom come in, or it really was a disappointing feud in the fans' eyes?
Well, I've been asked that many times. I think that just the chemistry wasn't there. I mean, the two teams were diametrically opposed. I mean, we felt that we could work with anybody. And you had mentioned earlier they had one style and one style only. And the 6-mans we had were atrocious. The chemistry was horrible. And it just didn't work. And I equated, somebody asked me this one a couple of weeks ago, and I equated to the fact that it was like the anticipation with the Hogan and Flair matches. It should have been a lot better, but it just didn't come across that way.
Absolutely.
And, their matches were so-so matches. And the matches we had, I didn't think were going to draw any money at all.
And they didn't draw that well. And you talk about, again, a dream match scenario that just kind of went down the tubes due to the way it was put together. Did you ever have a chance to actually face Hawk and Animal with Smash in just a straight tag team match, I should say?
I don't believe so. I think most of them I think they took place after I had gone.
Yeah, I'm
not sure. We had 6-mans. They were bad enough. I didn't want to be around for the time.
Yeah, and not that the Warrior was anything to deal with either, but that's...
Oh, well, I mean, there's another situation where Jim was, he was thrust into a position he wasn't ready for. You know, you can't replace Hogan and all that charisma. If you're a green guy, and if he'd have been brought along a little longer, but there again, sometimes people say, "Oh, we don't need this guy. We're going to put this guy in."
Right.
And then all of a sudden, the guy they don't need, he's still there.
Right. And then, right after he took the belt, they didn't have anybody ready for him to work with, and you were around at that point, so you saw it too. I mean, Rudy had just worked with the year before, and then there was Haku and Dino Bravo, and just some matches you really didn't have a heck of a lot of interest in seeing.
Right. I agree.
But that's wrestling history for you. What made you make the decision to leave WWF? It was still as, hot beyond belief and as far as mainstream America goes. But Survivor Series 1990 Thanksgiving night, that was it for Axe in the WWF, and we haven't seen you since. What made you decide that that was enough for you?
Well, like I said, I had been toying around with some proposals to do some things with the company. And after researching it and after talking to some people and after getting some inside information, I just didn't feel comfortable with the things that were being offered. And it wasn't anything against the company. I mean, they made a proposal, and sometimes you like the deal, sometimes you don't. And I also knew that, I could work other places. That wasn't the end of the world. I always like to tell the fact that I had a job when I was looking for that one. And I'll have a job when I leave there. I was fortunate enough my father instilled in me to get my college degree. And he said, you may never use it, but you might depend on it one time. It might give you the out to say no when you feel uncomfortable. And I just thank God for him and my mother for instilling in me, and I do the same thing with my grandsons. I don't care what they do with their life, as long as they get a degree that they can fall back on. And it's served me well over the years, because I see a lot of wrestlers and a lot of athletes that, they can't say no because they don't know what they're going to do after.
Sure.
And I taught school before I got into wrestling, so it was just a natural progression for me to go back. And for a number of years, I worked independence, and I worked overseas, and took some time off and started a business. I ran a security company with the entertainment company and did that for about 7 years. And then I got bored and got back into teaching.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, you've done a heck of a lot of good with some of the troubled kids down in your area, I believe, from what I've read. And
yeah, well, I've been fortunate. I mean, I think I had a calling to do that, because it's just, it's nothing you really... it's nothing you really say, gee, this is what I want to do.
Right.
I was sort of led that way. And, you know, it's a give and take. I've got as much back from the kids that, that I think I've given them.
Right. Let me ask you this now, Bill. Did it bother you to any extent, where you helped create Demolition, to look at what WWF did with it after you left? I mean, they put him back with Fuji for no reason whatsoever and no build to it. They basically just jobbed them out, and then they went by the wayside. You know, smashed it on.
There's a situation, Dan, that, you know, I saw it coming, and I told the other two people I saw it coming, and they evidently didn't see it, or thought I was BSing them, or thought that I was jealous, but, you know, I was in this business a long time and saw how things operate.
Right.
And at that particular time, their new babies were LOD.
Right.
And it didn't matter that Demolition was still popular, I think more popular, because, you know, from my gathering and looking back at it and listening to people talk, I don't think that Legion of Doom or the Road Warriors ever gained the popularity that we had for WWF.
No, not at all. In the Northeast, I don't think LOD really got over that strong at all.
I mean, they had more popularity in other areas.
Right.
And, of course, we didn't. But in that particular area, and for that particular company, and I think that the company, you know, powers that be wanted to make a choice, and they chose to go with them. But, you know, whether I was still there or not, I think it was a mistake. And then to see what, it really didn't hurt me to see what they were doing to him, because I already told them so.
Right.
I said, This is what's going to happen. And, of course, they didn't believe it. And I think that after a period of time, through the grapevine, they, you know, I got message back that, well, you were right. And it wasn't a matter of being right or wrong. I was trying to be protective. But,
right.
You know, I was fortunate that it didn't happen on my watch.
Right. Because I remember just as a kid in middle school, I remember how disappointed I was when the way Demolition kind of fell by the wayside and then just kind of vanished off of television altogether. And then they had it's almost kind of funny, you had the Randy Cully, Barry Darsow situation in 1987, and then they brought Darsow back as Repo Man later in the year, and I'm like, come on, are you kidding me? That's smash.
Well, see, there's another situation that we talked about earlier.
Yep.
Randy was so well known as Road Dogg. Barry was so well known and recognized as Smash. You can't throw pies in people's face. You can't do it.
No, it just insults people's intelligence, and then that kind of...
And then they bring the same thing back with Crush. How many times do we see back there with different characters?
Yeah, and different accents. He was a Hawaiian for a while, and I mean... But hey, it's their company, not ours. We can just comment on what we see. Something right now that's in the news that maybe you might have an interest in. Sports Illustrated had an article recently about the steroid saga that's going on right now, and some of the present-day WWE superstars have been linked to some of the doctors that have been prescribing steroids, some say illegally. You were around during the era that led to the George Zahorian conviction and then later the Vince McMahon trial. What are your thoughts on steroids? And I mean, you were around it. What kind of an impact did it have on the guys, and how prevalent was it in the WWF locker rooms?
I would say, including myself, I would say at that particular time, 70% or 75% of the talent was on it. That was just was what it was expected. But you have to keep in mind too, and it's not an excuse. And I hear the excuse that, you know, you could do it without steroids, but they were looking for a particular look. But in a lot of cases, it was for recuperation.
Right.
Like you said, the Sheik and myself, and sometimes you're on the road 80, 90, 100 days, and you're banged up. I don't care what people think. You're banged up, and then you've got to work out, and you've got to make the next town. And the steroids, you know, as everybody knows, were developed after the concentration camps to replenish the muscle tissue. But, you know, it goes, everybody, they say if one shot or one pill is good, two must be twice as good. That's not the case.
Sure.
In my situation in particular, I had to be monitored because I had high blood pressure and still do. So if I took too many, then my blood pressure would skyrocket and I'd have severe headaches. So I was getting, when I was available, probably one shot every 14 or 15 days from a doctor. But hell, I used to witness guys in there taking 2 and 3 shots a day.
Right. Yeah.
You knew things were going to explode. You knew things were going to tear down and rupture, and then the aggressiveness. But it was going on in football, and see, at that time it wasn't illegal.
Right. What was it, 1990?
Baseball players and football players and basketball players and everybody. But now, if it's illegal, it's illegal.
Right.
If you take them, guys are still going to take them. But if it's illegal, then there's consequences. That's what I try to tell my kids.
Right.
I teach. I work with the juvenile offenders. I mean, there's consequences for your action. You can still do whatever you think you want to do or whatever you think you can do. But if you get caught, then you have to pay the piper.
Sure.
So.
And really,
I know what's going on, and for God's sakes, the testing, the wellness testing. You think the wellness testing is working? It doesn't work in pro football. It doesn't work in pro baseball. It doesn't work in any other sport. And you can tell, look at a TV program. Look at a guy and see if that's normal.
Right. It's ridiculous. And these are human beings you're talking about, not, characters from a cartoon or something like that where you could illustrate and draw
I think
that.
it's a contributing factor to all these early deaths, too.
Sure. I mean, you must sit back. You're one of the legends of one of the biggest eras of professional wrestling, and you see year after year dozens of deaths from your peers and your friends.
Yeah,
I mean,
premature deaths.
Sure. I mean, what do you think it's going to take to stop it, Bill?
You probably won't be able to stop it because you know how it is. When I talk to my kids about drugs and I talk to my kids about burglaries or whatever they're involved in, they always think they're smarter and clever. It's always going to happen to the other guy. It's statistics. Drunk driving. You never think you're going to get in an accident, let alone killed. If they haven't learned by this time, I'm afraid they're not going to learn.
Right.
The only thing that might deter it, not stop it, is the government stepping in.
And again, and I ask you as a professional that lived this business for so long, how does it make you feel that the media and the real world, so to say, doesn't really care about these people? And what other profession do you have such a relatively small amount of people working this job, dropping dead in their 30s, 40s, early 50s, and we know what the reasons are? How does it make you feel that really, other than the fans, nobody cares?
Well, we never got the coverage that we should have gotten because of some of the things that went on through all the promoters and stuff. I remember when we were in the Mid-Atlantic area, there was a much higher respect level for the wrestlers. And then they got into the entertainment, and then they got into the stuff that they're doing now, and it just, how can you take some of the things that they do seriously?
Right. It's so sad on so many different levels. It's such a wonderful industry that's provided so much happiness to millions of fans all over the world. What really goes on with a lot of these people behind the scenes and in their real lives, it's a real tragedy.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, we're running out of time on this interview right now. 2 more quick questions I wanted to throw you away as we're preparing for the big day, Sunday morning.
My phone is beeping, so if I get cut off, I didn't hang up on you.
Oh, all right. Well, I've been used to that. It's happened more than once. I know the Sheik. Any Iron Sheik stories? You were around that lunatic for a long time. You're probably going to wind up on the same plane as him next weekend.
Oh, my God.
Any great Sheik stories?
There's not any stories that I could tell the general public.
Oh, well, we'll have to save...
The Sheik is a unique individual, and if anybody wants to be entertained, all they need to do is come up to the event, be around the Sheik for about a half hour, and you'll have your own stories.
I'll tell you,
he's a good guy to be around, but I mean, he makes up. Somebody's going to write a couple books about him because it's just he's hilarious.
Oh, I have many stories myself, some good, bad, ugly, and in between. But we'll have to swap a couple up in Ontario. And the final question I have to ask is just a wrestling fan in general and someone that observes the business. Why has it been so long since Axe and Smash has been together where there's so many independents, so many Legends reunions? What happened to my favorite tag team in the 1980s and 90s?
Well, we had a disagreement. It's still not resolved, but I was persuaded to do a couple legend signings this summer, this being the first one. And, you know, we've been asked to do a number of wrestling events and tours and things like that. And this is the first one I just agreed to, and hopefully it'll work out, and maybe we can get some things resolved. They're personal issues, and, you know, I don't want to get involved in it, but nothing that transpired in the ring, in our action. So I thought that, well, for the fans' sake, I mean, they've been asked, and when we get approached with the classic wrestling figures too, that
Sure.
sort of opened the door for this too.
Well, I'm glad I could help make it happen. Like I said, I had the big giant Demolition poster on my wall as a kid, and it was difficult just to find Barry Darsow. He was off up in nowhere's land up in Minnesota, but I know the fans are thrilled. Sunday morning, April 1st, WrestleMania 23, there's going to be a fever pitch in that area to begin with. WWE is taking over Detroit and that area of Ontario. And for you guys to be there, along with the Sheik, Tito Santana, Jimmy Snuka, Rhino, along with some independent wrestling action as the day goes on, just going to be a great event from top to bottom, Bill.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to seeing you up there.
Well, it's been a long time. I haven't seen you since you came to work for this area for the Boston Bad Boy Tony Rumble, and that was now a number of years ago where he's passed on. And I think we're going to have a catch up Saturday night, and then we'll have the big event itself Sunday morning. It's a good deal for us too. We can have some fun and in a business way. There you go.
That's it. That's it. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, Bill, we're running out of time here on the program. I can't thank you enough for this great interview, to provide the fans some insight into one of the great eras and the glory days of wrestling. And the bottom line is, fans, if you want to hear more about what went on with Demolition, Days of the Masked Superstar, what went on after WWF, and everywhere in between, you have to get on out to Windsor, Ontario, Canada. It's not as far as it sounds. It's just 5 miles outside of Detroit. It'll be over for plenty of time to get back to WrestleMania 23 if you're going to be among the 80,000 that are going to be at Ford Field in Detroit, and it'll be a day you'll never forget. You might be able to see the stars at WrestleMania 23. At Wrestling's Living Legends, you're going to be able to meet the stars. Bill, any final thoughts?
Well, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm encouraged by the number of people that are going to be there. And like you've mentioned, and I've mentioned many, many times, it's an event in itself, WrestleMania. And take in all the atmosphere that you can. Take this if you're available, any matches in the area, because it's something you're going to cherish and think back on as a positive memory in your life.
Fantastic. Thank you again so much for this interview. We'll be right back after this brief timeout with more MWF Extra.